Some killers leave behind chaos. Some leave no trace. But what if a murderer isn't hiding, and every move you make is being watched? This is the story of the observer, and the silence that kills. Quick flashes of shadowy streets, a canal, CCTV screens, and a mysterious tag with observed. Fade to black, then title appears. The Observer, a serial killer story. Blackmere was a tranquil English town, the kind of place where people knew each other by name, and locking your doors at night was more habit than necessity. But that morning, as mist hung low over the canal, that picture of the town changed forever. A jogger spotted a body near the water. A man lay peacefully on the ground as if put to sleep, not killed. His hands were folded neatly on his chest. No blood, no wounds, no signs of a struggle. But on his wrist was a small eye tag on which was clearly written, "Observed." The case went to Detective Inspector Jonathan Hale. Even with 20 years of service, this scene unnerved him. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't an act of rage. This was planning, deep, meticulous planning. The post-mortem report shook the police even more. Death was caused by a synthetic toxin that stopped the heart in mere seconds, painless, soundless. This was not the work of an ordinary man. 10 days later, a second body was found. This time, a woman, seated at her dining table in her apartment. A cup of tea still warm, the door locked from the inside. No sign of forced entry. And yes, the same tag. Observed? Fear spread through Blackmere. The media gave the killer a name, the Observer. When police looked into the victims' lives, one common thread emerged: they all lived alone. People who, if they disappeared, would not be immediately missed. But the real truth surfaced when Hale opened their past court records. They had all once been witnesses, and at some point they had all chosen silence. Here, the story takes a new turn, because the Observer wasn't just killing people, he was delivering verdicts. Blackmere had changed. Streets that once felt safe now carried a permanent tension, as if the town itself was holding its breath. After the fourth attempted murder, the police task force worked without sleep. Detective Inspector Jonathan Hale stood at the center of it all, but for the first time in his career, certainty had abandoned him. The evidence pointed clearly to Elliot Marsh, a former municipal surveillance technician, quiet, intelligent, and visible. Years earlier, Marsh had access to traffic cameras, public CCTV systems, and archived footage that most people didn't even know still existed. He had spent years watching a city without being seen, and then he disappeared. When police searched Marsh's old residence, what they found disturbed even the most hardened officers. Entire walls were covered with photographs. Not crime scenes, not violence. Just people alone, sitting in silence, waiting at bus stops, eating by themselves, walking at night. Each photograph was dated. Some were taken years before the murders. The Observer had been patient. Hale realized something terrifying. The murders were not impulsive acts. They were conclusions. Decisions made long ago, simply executed now. As Hale reviewed the files late one night, a detail struck him hard. Every victim had been a witness in a violent crime, but more importantly, each witness had convinced themselves they were innocent. I didn't see clearly. I wasn't sure. It wasn't my responsibility. Marsh wasn't punishing criminals. He was punishing moral silence. The city demanded answers. Politicians demanded arrests. Media channels labeled the killer a monster. But Hale began to suspect something far more unsettling. Marsh didn't see himself as a killer at all. He believed he was correcting a flaw in society. Then came the moment that changed everything. While reviewing an old cold case, his own handwriting caught Hale's attention. A witness report stamped and dismissed years ago. The case involved a young woman attacked near a train station. The witness had been Elliot Marsh, and the detective who closed the file? Jonathan Hale. That night, Hale received a phone call. No introduction. No threats. Just a calm voice. "You taught me something," the man said. "That silence is safer than truth." The call ended. For the first time, Hale felt what his victims must have felt for years. Being seen, judged, and helpless. Using the call signal, police traced Marsh to an abandoned underground surveillance hub beneath Blackmere's old railway station. It was a forgotten place filled with dead monitors and tangled cables, except one room. That room was alive. Screens flickered to life, showing live footage from across the city. Streets, shops, apartments, hallways. Blackmere was still being watched. Marsh stood calmly at the center. He didn't run. "I never enjoyed killing," he said as officers arrested him. "I enjoyed clarity. People live their whole lives believing their silence doesn't matter. I proved it does." During interrogation, Marsh confessed to every murder, without remorse, without pride. Just certainty. He described his victims not as people but as decisions, choices that had consequences delayed, not erased. The court proceedings were swift. The media celebrated. Headlines declared the nightmare over. Marsh was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security psychiatric facility. Black Mirror exhaled. But Jonathan Hale did not. Because weeks later, after the trial ended, Hale received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photograph taken from years ago. It showed Hale himself. Younger, tired, sitting alone at his desk. On the back, one word was written: observed. They said the case was closed. They said justice was done. But some stories don't end in courtrooms. Blackmere had begun to heal. Streets were quiet again. Residents returned to routines. Children played. Shopkeepers unlocked doors without glancing over their shoulders. Yet for Jonathan Hale, normalcy was impossible. Every shadow seemed alive, every reflection questioned him. The Observer's final message, his own photograph with the word "observed," haunted him like a ghost. Hale spent weeks re-examining every detail of Marsh's crimes, trying to understand why the man had chosen him. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't personal in the conventional sense. Marsh's philosophy was far more unsettling. He believed judgment delayed was judgment denied, and Hale, by dismissing a young witness years ago, had failed to see a truth that mattered. Marsh had given Hale a lesson in accountability, patience, and observation. The Observer had made him the final witness to his own life. Despite the court ruling and Marsh's imprisonment, Hale realized that the killer had won in a different way. Hale now saw the world through Marsh's lens. Each person was a series of choices. Each silence, each hesitation, each avoidance. It carried weight. He began to notice things in the city he had ignored for decades. Small injustices, minor betrayals, unnoticed kindnesses. Everything mattered. Nothing escaped observation. Then came the most unsettling discovery. A hidden room in Marsh's old surveillance hub, untouched during the arrest. In it, Hale found a series of letters, carefully addressed to him. Marsh had anticipated being caught. Each letter detailed the victims' lives, not as statistics but as stories of human inaction, of missed chances to act or speak. And the final letter, written in careful, almost reverent handwriting, contained a single line. "Now it is your turn to observe, Hale. Watch, learn, and act before it is too late." Hale understood. Marsh's last gift wasn't vengeance, it was responsibility. The Observer had vanished, but his philosophy remained embedded in Hale. To prevent future horrors, Hale would have to become vigilant, aware, and relentless. The line between hunter and observer had blurred. Months later, Hale returned to the canal where the first body was found. Fog rolled over the water, eerily familiar. For a moment, he imagined Marsh standing silently on the opposite bank. Then he realized something chilling. Marsh may be locked away, but the world still hides observers everywhere. People watching, judging, waiting. And sometimes the greatest danger isn't the killer outside. It's the silence inside yourself. Hale looked down at his own reflection in the water and whispered to himself, "I am observed, and now I must observe."
Final take. The story ends here, officially. But the lesson lingers. Every choice, every silence, every witness matters. Because in the end, the real killer is not always the one we chase. It's the part of ourselves we refuse to see. Watch the series again, notice the details you missed. And remember, someone, somewhere is always observing.